This story began in the Demon Lord's castle, where the mighty ruler of darkness roared in agony as 4 overpowered mages unleashed their devastating power, striking the Demon King down with merciless powerful surge of electricity. Following this remarkable defeat, the Kingdom of Azure threw the biggest party of the century at the triumphant return of these 4 heroes. Even the king was impressed with the heroic feat, and as the 4 heroic mages knelt before the king expressed his deepest gratitude for ridding the kingdom of the Demon Lord. In honor of their bravery, the king bestowed upon them the highest mage title ever awarded, the Exalted 4 Emperors. As the king announced this, Eftel, our protagonist, stood in disbelief. This title was normally reserved for royalty, and yet here he was, about to be crowned Emperor Stormdale. As the king placed the crown of honor on Eftel's head, proclaiming him Emperor Stormdale, Eftel couldn't believe it. Tears of joy streamed down his face as the crowd cheered. This marked the greatest moment of his life, a reward for 40 years of magical dedication. Amid his tears, Eftel recalled those decades spent honing his craft, now gloriously rewarded. 15 years had passed after this great event. Eftel, now an old geezer, lived quietly in the countryside, cultivating monstrous plants. But while tending to his plants, Eftel noticed his palms were bloody, but he wasn't alarmed because he already knew he had a terminal illness that would die at any time. That's when Merlin, a sassy young mage in training, strolled up to Eftel asking why he persisted in his research despite his health condition. In response, Eftel turned and inquired if she worried for his health, to which the young girl answered yes. Eftel was about to say something when he suddenly remembered the past when he and his colleagues had leveled the demon castle. As the castle collapsed, Eftel found a demon child and her mother trapped in a fallen rubble. The demon mother had begged for baby Merlin to be saved, and Eftel, moved by compassion, accepted and saved the child. Back in the present, Eftel, remorseful, realized Merlin likely didn't recall he'd wiped out her entire race, and her concern for his health deepened his guilt even more. Nevertheless, Eftel answered her question, explaining that his relentless research was because he had always wanted to become the world's strongest mage. However, Eftel remarked that one day he suddenly realized that the pinnacle of magic wasn't something anybody could just reach. Merlin protested, asking what the heck he was talking about, and then reminded him he was the strongest mage in the land, the mighty Emperor Stormdale. Calmly, Eftel countered that he was considered mighty in the eyes of the common man, but in the face of true power he was just a mid-tier mage. Moreover, Eftel confessed that compared to his other 3 colleagues blessed with overwhelming skills, he was nothing but trash. Suddenly, a messenger rushed up, handing Eftel a letter and announcing that Lord Blazesoul, one of his former comrades, had cracked the code on magical talent. Eftel nearly dislocated his jaw reading the letter, where he realized that Blazesoul had actually developed a method to measure magical aptitude. Something Eftel had failed at for decades. Of course, Eftel wasted no time ordering his students inside to test it. There, 4 test tubes with special solutions sat on a table, and then Eftel announced that Merlin would be the first subject. Eftel instructed that 4 strands of Merlin's hair be placed in the solution, and soon, the students marveled as the tubes lit up like Christmas tree, glowing blue and green. When a student asked what the colors signified, Eftel explained that according to Blazesoul's research, they represented the elements of water and wind, and their brightness reflected Merlin's level of compatibility with the elements. Since basic magic split into 4 elements, fire, earth, water, and wind, and looking at the result of the experiment, Eftel was very certain that Blazesoul's theory was pure genius. Unlike the Academy's decade-long process of teaching all elements to the students before testing their talents, Blazesoul's method could identify talent at birth. Eagerly, Eftel resolved to test himself, but Merlin objected, insisting his greatness was undisputed. Still, his students hyped him up, excited to see the famed mage's results and how the test tubes would explode from too much glow. Eftel himself was curious. He felt that after a lifetime of contributing his life to the study of magic and had failed time and time again to reach the top, he deserved to know if he ever did stood a chance or even got the potential to be the best. As a boy, while his peers played, he'd outworked everyone in the kingdom, even his talented colleagues. Yet, in the present, his eyes widened in absolute horror when after the test tubes remained colorless. The room went silent. After consulting Blazesoul's notes, his students deduced that colorless meant that the subject was a magical failure. Eftel found it unbelievable that after all these years, he had spent his entire life faking it and never made it, since according to the test result, he had not been blessed with a single spirit of the element. Eftel, in despair, questioned how it was even possible that a talentless nobody was even crowned an emperor. A student suggested retesting for errors, but despite desperate repeated tries, the tubes still showed no trace of color. Months later, Eftel's illness had him bedridden, lying there like a useless sack of potatoes. As he waited for the Grim Reaper, Eftel finally understood why he had never reached the same heights as his comrades. He had worked like a maniac and devoted his entire life to the study of magic, and still his colleagues left him in the dust. At that moment, Eftel could not contain the tears from falling freely as he cursed himself for being a talentless old fool. But suddenly, the bed quaked, the ceiling shuddered, and a glowing magical circle appeared, inscribed with skill and reincarnation. Eftel suddenly found himself standing right in the middle of an ocean. Before he could grasp what the heck was happening, a giant goddess chick emerged from the sky, praising his use of the unbreakable skill she'd gifted him. At that moment, Eftel realized that the reason he never quit, even when reality kept slapping him in the face, was because of unbreakable skill. Just then, the goddess announced she would give Eftel a second chance at reincarnation with a skill of his choosing, and when Eftel hesitated, the goddess even suggested accelerated growth, to which Eftel, stubborn as a goat, firmly refused, asserting he didn't need her blessings. Eftel stated that he had everything he needed, and then pointed out that as long as he put in the effort, he could accomplish anything he wanted. Impressed and amused, the goddess remarked that she found his resilience admirable and then deemed his selection complete. The goddess then declared that it was time for his reincarnation, and then asked if Eftel was ready for rebirth, to which Eftel eagerly agreed. As the goddess vanished, wishing him luck, Eftel jolted awake as a boy. With his past memories flooding back, Eftel raced to a mirror, and when he saw he was now a boy, he confirmed he had truly been reincarnated. Back in the game, Eftel vowed to become the world's strongest mage. To test his elements, he set out 4 glasses of solution and dropped in his hair strands. Yet, when they remained colorless, he remembered he had bragged about not needing the goddess blessing, which meant he would be starting his new life from rock bottom. That wasn't a problem for Eftel, but the only thing that got him worried was if in this new life, he still didn't change a thing and history repeated himself. Sometime later, while lying on the grass, Eftel spotted a weird-looking bird flying up in the sky. Recognizing it as a strange dragon, Eftel chased it, fearing it was heading for people's homes. But then, he paused, remembering he was no longer Eftel, the emperor, but was now a literal brat with the physique of a bug. Meanwhile, some group of soldiers started chasing after the dragon after realizing the dragon was heading for the capital. Still, old habits died hard as Eftel raised a finger and wished he could use one of his former tier 10 spells. But suddenly a flicker of light started glowing from his finger. As the light intensified, a colossal magic circle materialized in the sky. While Eftel puzzled over it, a powerful surge of electricity blasted upward, startling the army and accidentally electrocuting the dragon, causing it to crash to the ground. At that instant, Eftel realized that, though he might have reincarnated as a talentless brat, his old sage powers were still intact. 3 years passed in a flash and Eftel turned 7, but he never stopped studying all the magic books he could find. While studying, he realized that although he'd reincarnated into his old world, he'd astonishingly been catapulted 400 years after his death. Just then, some random dude at the door handed Eftel's mom some monthly upkeep funds. Eftel currently lived with a young MILF who he later realized was his mom. Sadly, this young hottie was just as talentless as he was, and because of that they wallowed in abject poverty. Meanwhile, the cash-dropping dude turned out to be his stepbrother Frasier, second son of the family. You see, Eftel had been reborn as a member of a family of dukes that happened to be of his descent. Whenever Eftel asked Frasier about their dad, Frasier typically replied that the man was too busy to bother acknowledging his existence. It turned out, Eftel's father was a leading figure in the Order of Mages, and also a duke of the land. Eftel had never met this deadbeat father of his before, but he was told the man was loaded enough to make 9 concubines warm his meat at night alongside Eftel's hot mom. Yet, due to Eftel's mom's lack of talent, she was treated worse than a stray dog by the other hags, and Eftel was treated as an illegitimate child. Even worse, they'd been exiled to a countryside hovel far from the kingdom's bustling town. However, Frasier, despite his legitimacy, couldn't tolerate this injustice and stepped in to help. Eftel grasped that the odds were stacked against him, yet he believed studying magic could carve his path to greatness. That day, over tea, Frasier asked Eftel what he aspired to become as an adult. Excitedly, Eftel proclaimed he would love to be a mage and enroll at the Academy of Magic. But his mom shut him up immediately and reminded Frasier that, like her son was hopeless at magic, and she would prefer he enrolled at the military college instead. Frasier immediately endorsed her idea as a wonderful one and boasted he also graduated from the military college. Frasier added that though his father wanted him to become a mage and follow his footsteps, he had chosen to rather become a magic swordsman since it was a rarity in the military and a valuable asset. Frasier mentioned that he happened to be free that day and then sought Eftel's mom permission to give Eftel some masterclass in swordsmanship, which the woman gleefully approved. Later, in the forest, the swordsmanship training commenced, but seeing how excited Frasier was at teaching him swordsmanship, Eftel deduced the reason his brother had been tutoring him all this while and looking out for him was simply because Frasier had pity on him for his lack of magic talent. Even though Eftel knew Frasier wanted him to enroll at the military college, Eftel halted the training session and boldly declared that he really wanted to go to the Magic Academy. Shocked at hearing this, Frasier tried telling the little man that everyone had things they were good at, but then decided to give Eftel a chance to prove he was Magic Academy material. Frasier promised Eftel that if he could replicate his magic spell, then he would personally recommend him to the dean of the Magic Academy. This excited Eftel, but deep down, Frasier knew it was just a waste of time, but aimed to teach the little guy some harsh realities of life. Wasting no time, Frasier muttered some gibberish incantation and then conjured a whirlwind the size of a noodle twirled on a fork. As he hurled it at a tree, the whirlwind managed to snap the trunk of the tree, causing it to collapse. Proud of his divine talent, Frasier turned to Eftel, expecting applause. But Eftel just stood there, waiting for the real show to start. Realizing the dude was actually done, Eftel mirrored him, summoning a colossal whirlwind capable of raising an entire village, shocking the living daylight out of Frasier. The tempest tore through the forest, felling trees in its wake. Horrified that a 7-year-old could pull off such a powerful magic without even uttering a single chance, Frasier asked Eftel if he was actually the one who just did that. Confidently, and yet a little bit embarrassed, Eftel apologized for not mimicking Frasier precisely, and then informed Frasier that it was just some basic Tier 4 magic spell, leaving Frasier stunned who knew Tier 4 magic spell were advanced level spells. Desperately curious, Frasier demanded to know how Eftel did it. Of course, Eftel wasn't about to reveal he was a top mage that reincarnated into a boy, so he lied like a pro that he read it in a book. Eftel bragged that if he was to be at his best, he could even pull off a Tier 10 spell, and on hearing this bombshell, Frasier lost it and fainted. Eftel, staring at Frasier's unconscious body, couldn't fathom his reaction and felt something was definitely wrong. Also, Eftel remembered that back then when he shot down the dragon from the sky earlier, the knights had assumed the gods did it. So with both the reaction of the knights and his brother Frasier, Eftel was certain something must have gone wrong over the last 4 centuries. That afternoon at home, Eftel pondered about the situation and came to a shocking conclusion that magic had fallen off hard. According the chart provided, Tier 9 to 10 magic spell were considered lost magic and deemed impossible, while Tier X was considered unthinkable. Also, chantless magic were considered impossible, and no wonder Frasier had fainted after seeing Eftel cast a spell without uttering a single word. Just then, Frasier, who laid on the bed in the room, abruptly regained his consciousness and immediately demanded to know how Frasier had cast a chantless spell. Not wanting to cause another medical emergency, Eftel gaslit the dude into thinking he just hit his head too hard. Frasier, gullible as ever, believed the cap instantly. And with that, they went right back to sword training, where Frasier taught Eftel proper sword handling and footwork, but the dumb kissed dirt repeatedly. Yet, thanks to his goddess-given unbreakable skill, Eftel persisted, determined not to falter against Alcott, despite no intent to join military college. Fast forward 3 years, and Eftel, now 10, had leveled up big time. He could slice through rocks and trees with ease. All that training had changed him. He wasn't just chasing magic anymore. He wanted to be the ultimate magic swordsman. One day, while training, Frasier told him they had a special guest instructor. Eftel, intrigued, waited to see who it was. Then, in walked a freakishly huge, battle-scarred monster of a man. Frasier introduced him as Mariah, ex-commander of the kingdom's knights. The dude was built like a skyscraper, and Eftel looked like an ant next to him. This freak of nature smugly demanded they started the duel immediately, but sensing Eftel's hesitation, probably due to fear, Mariah wasted no time, leaped high and attacked with his massive sword. Eftel dodged skyward, and was amazed that the big guy wasn't only huge, but also freakishly fast. As Mariah continued his relentless assault, Eftel, with no choice, channeled mana to his legs, boosting his agility and impressing Mariah. The two titans clashed blades at breakneck speed, forcing Mariah to admit that the kid was really something, and then hint at a recommendation. Watching, Alcott was highly impressed at Eftel's mana control. Recalling one of their trainings, Frasier had initially taught Eftel how to control mana in his body as a way of enhancing his physical abilities, but he was shocked when Eftel did it in one try and smoothly as well. Back to the duel, Eftel knew he could finish the big guy if he wanted to using magic, but mid-leap, dodging an incoming attack, he figured winning with magic would be meaningless, and it would be even more satisfying to win with the sword. As the duel intensified, Mariah swung his giant blade, which Eftel parried. However, the immense pressure from Mariah's sword overwhelmed Eftel. Just when Mariah assumed Eftel was weak, Eftel stunned Mariah by swirling their blades skyward, moved right into Mariah's big arm, gripped it tightly, and surprisingly gave the big guy a WWE power slam. Mariah laid on the ground, eyes opened, and could not believe he nearly saw his ancestors while dueling a rugrat. While Eftel, surprised that his body acted instinctively, looked at his palm and remembered that the move was as a result of learning judo in his past life. Then, Mariah rose, slapped Eftel's back, and announced he had passed the test. Eftel, not recalling signing up for any test, demanded an explanation, to which Alcott revealed Mariah was actually the military college headmaster, and Eftel, by winning the fight, had just secured his admission to the military college. Later that evening, the weather was terrible and Frasier suddenly remembered that Eftel was still out in the forest, probably still training, so he decided to go get him. Our boy, meanwhile, was out there in the forest flexing his Tier 10 magic spell and destroying the ecosystem. He loved the storm because it gave him free sound effects for his destruction, and kept nosy people from seeing the magic carnage he was unleashing. Just then, Frasier rushed into the forest, interrupting Eftel's training session. Concerned, Frasier sternly warned Eftel to stay safe and avoid risking his life at such a crucial moment of his life, especially with his upcoming enrollment at the military college just around the corner. Although Eftel hated the idea of enrolling in the military college, but thanks to his WWE takedown of Mariah, his fate was sealed. In this world, a child officially transitioned to adulthood at 15, consequently requiring them to leave home. At that time, Eftel, still 14, had rejected the military college and, despite his lack of magical talent making the Magic Academy a long shot, he vowed that upon turning 15, he would leave home, prove his worth, and secure a place at the Magic Academy no matter what. Upon returning home that day, Frasier announced to Eftel and his mom that he had a great news. Eftel's father had finally agreed to meet him. While Eftel's mom was so excited about the news to the point of shedding tears, Eftel felt no spark of excitement, given that the old man had made no effort to see him in all 14 years of his life. The next day, Frasier escorted Eftel and his mom to the Alcott's palace, their father's grand residence. Upon stepping inside the mansion, Eftel could not believe that while he and his mom were out there eating the struggle, his deadbeat father was living like an emperor. As Frasier announced their arrival, Eftel spotted his dad chilling like a king, with some random ugly dude beside him with a forehead like Megamind's. Without hesitation, Eftel addressed the Duke as father and introduced himself as his son, only for Alcott to sharply correct him, insisting he use your grace instead. Duke Alcott clarified that the reason be, Eftel was an illegitimate son and a total disgrace to his bloodline. The Duke went on a whole rant about how a son of the famed Emperor Stormgale as a talentless waste of oxygen brought him to tears. Yet Eftel, secretly the reincarnated Stormgale, silently wept within, just thinking at how rotten his descendants had become. Moments later, Alcott inquired whether Eftel had secured admission to the military college, to which Eftel confidently replied yes. Alcott chuckled, calling it splendid news, leaving Eftel to ponder if the vile man genuinely took pride in him. However, Alcott soon revealed his true intent, stating that Eftel's enrollment meant he'd no longer need to squander money on him. Gleefully, Alcott proclaimed he'd be free of funding a worthless donkey. Alcott added that his sole request was that Eftel avoid shaming the family, and to ensure this, he summoned his eldest son, Joachim, to confirm Eftel's readiness for the college, a task Scarface Joachim accepted with all pleasure. In the following scene, Eftel was led to the arena to face Joachim in a duel. Before the duel, Frasier gave Eftel a little PSA, warning that Joachim wasn't just some regular swordsman. He was a blade master at 15 and lacked the kindness gene. As Eftel readied himself, Joachim unleashed a torrent of taunts, branding Eftel and his mother stupid peasants. Joachim wasted no time reminding Eftel that everyone in the family despised both him and his whorish mom. Joachim went as far as saying Eftel's mom was a call girl who begged to have a child for their dad because the man was a powerful mage, only to birth a useless, talentless porcupine. With a devilish grin, Joachim mused that he'd love to end Eftel's mother for dragging the family name to the mud, but would settle for crushing Eftel instead. Swinging his sword at Eftel, Joachim signaled the duel's start and, oozing arrogance, boasted he'd grant Eftel the first move. To further mock Eftel, Joachim stuck out his tongue and promised to go gentle on him, though not as gently as their father had mounted his piggy mom. Infuriated beyond measure, Eftel charged at the smug fool without delay. Eftel swung his sword with ferocity, but Joachim, startled by Eftel's speed, narrowly evaded the strike. Swiftly, Eftel infused his steps with mana, and, radiating a fiery aura, clashed blades with a now petrified Joachim. With unrelenting force, Eftel battered Joachim's face, knocking out most of his teeth and sending him crashing to the ground, leaving the onlookers stunned. Standing over Joachim's sprawled form, Eftel warned him never to slander his mother with that filthy mouth again, or mercy would be far from him next time. Joachim, despite his mouth looking like it had just survived a blender attack, still demanded a rematch. But Eftel shot him a chilling glare as he exited the arena, vowing that another fight would be his end. Joachim immediately soiled his pants in fear at hearing those words. With the duel over, Eftel urged his mother to leave at once, but seeing her stunned by his demolition of Joachim, he reassured her with a smile that he remained her son. Afterward, Eftel thanked his wretched father for the invitation, and then declared his departure. Several days later, in the kingdom's capital, the city gates swung open, unveiling ranks of knights. As war horns blared, the knightly troop marched forth, primed for battle. Meanwhile, at the Alcott's palace, 3 cloaked dudes informed someone at the door that the king had summoned a crusade against their neighbors. That someone was Alcott, who asked if the barbarians were prepared, to which the figures confirmed yes, adding that the vanguard was already in place. On the battlefield, the kingdom's knights stood ready to wage war against the barbaric foes, while back at the palace, Alcott prepared himself to launch his coup d'etat. Meanwhile, Eftel, at home with his mother, heard a loud bang at the door. Upon reaching the door, they stood stunned as a bloodied Frasier appeared, cradling a baby, with a wounded Mariah at his side. Mariah apologized for their sudden intrusion, but Eftel was more concerned about the infant in Frasier's arms. However, 12 hours earlier, at the kingdom's castle, Frasier had assembled the finest knights in the kingdom, and ordered them to ensure they secure the castle with the lives. When Mariah curiously demanded to know why Frasier had gathered such immense number of knights, Frasier revealed that he got an intelligence that the Chancellor's faction planned to assassinate the Crown Prince. You see, the kingdom's leadership split into 2 camps, those loyal to the reigning king and those backing the Chancellor, the king's elder brother. The reason stemmed from the late king bequeathing the throne to his younger son, and made the elder the Chancellor. However, since the younger king bore only daughters and no sons for years, the Chancellor's eldest son stood as heir. Then, miraculously, the king sired a son, who was instantly declared the new heir. This angered those who supported the Chancellor, and they began plotting in secret. Hence, the rumors of a plan to assassinate the Crown Prince came to be. Just then, they were alerted that the barbarians had made their way into the castle. Instantly, Frasier ordered that the young prince be safeguarded at all costs. As the barbarians stormed in, Mariah sprang forward, blocking their advance. While the barbarians tore through the castle, Frasier seized the baby prince, and together with Mariah, they escaped. Back in the present, Frasier explained to Eftel and his mother that, with nowhere safe to take the prince, their home was his only refuge. Gazing at the innocent child, Eftel couldn't fathom that a human would go to such an extent as to assassinate a defenseless baby. When Eftel questioned how the barbarians infiltrated despite Fraysier's orders to secure the castle, Fraysier admitted their father was the head of the Chancellor's faction and might be complicit in the